So I want to show you that all morning long I have been taking notes. I have a ton of notes that we're going to be going through, bullet points on the watch and warning timeline from the National Weather Service. So it's the San Antonio and the Austin offices that do the entire surrounding area. So Texas Hill Country is included in that. And I think a lot of folks, I've seen questions come up. Was there enough lead time? Were there enough warnings? And I can tell you, yes, the National Weather Service 100% did their job in giving the watches, the warnings, the information that needed to go out. After that, I can't speak to what happened, and I don't want to get into any of the politics, but I just want to go through exactly what we saw. So, want to start on Thursday, July 3rd. And like I mentioned, I have graphics that are going through each and every one of these. So you can see that this is coming down again, straight from the National Weather Service. They issued a flood watch. So I have the exact timing, 1:45 p.m. on Thursday, July 3rd. They issued its first flood watch that would continue until 7 o'clock in the morning. So again, this was 2 o'clock in the afternoon Thursday, and it was going to continue until 7 a.m. Friday. Basically, what it's saying there is portions of Western Hill Country and some other areas could be seeing anywhere from 1 to 3 inches of rain, and then isolated amounts of 5 to 7 inches. Okay, so let's fast forward to 2:28 in the afternoon. We have what the National Weather Service was calling a situation update. And I do have a picture coming up at the next slide, so I'll show you kind of what that looked like. But it was basically a PDF, so several slides or graphics explaining, hey, the situation has increased in intensity, meaning less than an hour later, about 45 minutes later, they were saying how the flood threat is increasing, and they went through details on what is a flood watch versus what is a flood warning, a flash flood warning, a flash flood emergency, which we ended up having 9 in total. And I'll have more details kind of on that in just a moment. But then they also talk about the flood threat at night and how that's very different from a daytime flooding event, because A, you can see it, and at night, B, you're sleeping, maybe you don't have your phone on, your phone died, whatever the dealio is. So at 2:28 in the afternoon on Thursday, they said, hey, it looks like this is going to be a bigger and greater situation than what we had initially thought. So then come 7:51 in the evening, again, Thursday, they expanded the flood watch. The area. So at first, and I'll go back to the graphic really quick, it was just this small area. Well, it was eventually extended to a larger area. Same time, 11:41 p.m. was the first flash flood warning, and that was in Bandera County, so just to the south of where Kerrville is. So I want to show you the pictures that I have here. Don't know why I was turning my page yet, but we have that situation report that I mentioned. So there were several different graphics, and I just put 2 on the screen, but they had several saying, hey, what has changed? That the flood, from the first briefing of the event, that the flood watch was expanded into hill country, but also that we could be seeing even heavier rain, so that there was a marginal to slight, so a 1 or 2 out of 4 risk for that flooding. So they were kind of looking at the models saying, hey, this is looking to be a bit more intense than we had originally thought. And then you can see this graphic on the right, flooding at night. Sometimes it's difficult to see during the day, but it's impossible to see at night. And that is the truth, especially with this wall of water. You probably couldn't even see it coming in the daytime because of just the meandering and hills and valleys that we have in the area, but something that we're watching closely. Okay, so now we're into July 4th. This is Friday. At 1:06 in the morning, there was a flash flood warning that was put out for central Kerr County. So we had the flood watch But now they're saying, no, there's a flash flood warning, meaning that flash flooding is happening as we speak. So that was for Kerr County, 1:48 a.m. So about 42 minutes later, they said that 2 to 4 inches of rain has already fallen. So this is for Kerr County. And I just want to let you know, I'm focusing on Kerr County with all of these just because it expanded so much later on. Okay, so that flash flooding is likely occurring. And then once again, they warned about how this is happening overnight. You can't see that, you need to get to higher ground. They were letting people know that this is a particularly dangerous situation in the sense that you can't see what's going on. And not only is it flooding, it's also raining at this time too. So it was like a dual thing that was going on. Okay, 2:37 flood watch was extended until 1 p.m. You remember initially it was 7 a.m. They said, no way, this is going until Friday afternoon at least. And then we have 3:02. So we're starting to get into even more rain. They had mentioned very dangerous flash flooding unfolding in Kerr County, 3 to 7 inches in the last 3 hours of the Guadalupe River at Hunt. So again, we have the North Fork and the South Fork of the Guadalupe River, and those both funneled in where it forks, and then that is right at or near Hunt. And then we would go downstream toward Kerrville, toward Comfort, locations like that. And then what they mentioned in their post, again, this is in what we call the National Weather Service chat, so where we get to chat back and forth with the National Weather Service, local officials, media. They said, and no indication of these storms letting up. Basically, they were training storms that sat overhead and didn't go anywhere. And that's why we saw so much rain in such a short amount of time. I mean, you can see 3 to 7 inches in 3 hours. So let's go to 3:22. They then mention Guadalupe River at Hunt, which we had just talked about, got all that rain, is already at major flood stage, sorry, my penmanship there. And the river flood warning was issued at that time. Okay, 3:36. The Kerr County flash flood warning has been extended until 7 a.m. So they issued that warning at 1:06. So then they're continuing to extend this in the area. 3:56 a.m. a flash flood emergency has been issued. Now that is the highest of the high. If there is a flash flood emergency, flash flooding is happening right now. Flash flood warning is, yes, flash flooding is coming, if not it's happening, but this is saying that it is occurring and it's not stopping. So it's the next step up. So when you see these emergencies, it's like, okay, this is getting real. This wall of water, and I'm going to get to some heights in a moment, but is coming. And you need to be away from the riverbed, because the problem is, even if you are not even close to the riverbed, we saw 26 feet in 45 minutes. That is the flood wall that we were talking about, or wave rather. Okay, so then we have at 4:20 in the morning, they were getting reports of 6.5 inches of rain at Hunt, and then just upstream of Hunt. So remember I mentioned the North and South Fork? Well, they got 7.85 inches. So that is a ton of rain in a very, very short amount of time. So these are the kind of posts that we see from the National Weather Service. So they were talking about all that rain, and they actually showed that graphic saying this is the area that was basically the bullseye of all of that heavy rain. Then we have the river and how quickly it rose. And so what happened is we saw that wall go through. There was a 22-foot rise in a 3-hour time span at Hunt. And you can see that the water receded basically as quickly as it went up, and the reason being, all that water is moving downstream. This is Texas Hill Country. They call it that for a reason. Not like here in Houston, where the water just kind of sits because we're so flat. No, we have elevation changes, and so the water is all pushing downstream. So that was a very interesting graphic to see. So, and something interesting that they were saying at 5:04, the Guadalupe River at Hunt. Again, Hunt is the most northern or upstream location of the Guadalupe River, and then we go down, and I'll get to some other locations. But they said the Guadalupe River at Hunt sharply rose to its second highest height on record, higher than the 1987 flood, which was 38 years ago, which I think a lot of folks that live in the area remember that. No, this was worse than that. And they were saying the flood wave continues downstream. So again, it started at Hunt, then it goes through Kerrville and down to Comfort. So they were letting people know at 5, saying, hey, this is happening upstream. So if you live downstream, you need to take action. 5:14 in the morning. This is when they said reports of a 22-foot rise in 3 hours at Hunt. Now, this last bullet point that I have on your screen here, 5:36 in the morning, flash flood emergency along the Guadalupe River at Hunt through Kerrville and all the way down to Center Point. Okay, then something else that they put out here was that a wireless emergency alert, so a WEA, was sent out to cell phones for residents and campers along the river. So this was 5:36 in the morning. You know, I don't know, to be quite honest, I don't know much about the wireless emergency alerts, but I assume, and you know, I'll get clarification on this, but it's very similar to what like an Amber Alert would be. Like you get notified, like your phone starts making that noise, and I assume that it's GPS because it said to residents, but then campers who were along the river. So, you know, that alert went out at 5:36. So then let's head over to 5:42, and they are saying along the Guadalupe River at Hunt, more than 7.5 inches of rain in total. So by the 6:30 half hour, flash flood emergencies are ongoing in the area. Get to higher ground. Then we head into your 7 o'clock hour. Flash flood emergency was then extended downstream on the Guadalupe River from Center Point to below Comfort. So passing through Kerrville and all the way down to these other 2 locations. So in the 7 o'clock hour, that's when the sun came up. And that's when on our little chat, I start seeing pictures, because I was working on this morning, of all of the flooding coming in, because obviously a lot of this happened, and that wave that was moving downstream, you know, it happened at night, so it's difficult to see pictures. We do have some time lapses on our website that is a great resource, but that's when we start to see the pictures of the flooding and the rapid water that is moving down the Guadalupe River. Okay, so let's, we'll go to the next graphic here. So then it's 8:09, the Guadalupe River at Hunt, the gauge is actually flooded out. There was an area that tracks how much water, how much rain. It basically got destroyed by the strong currents. So then we started losing info of what was happening up there. But just before 10 a.m. on Friday, the Guadalupe River at Kerrville said that it preliminary crested at 36.58 feet. That is huge. That was in a very short amount of time as well, just how quickly that water came up. Then again, just a few minutes later, the flood wave did finally reach the Guadalupe River at Comfort. That's where we had 26-foot increase in the river level in 45 minutes. So major flood stage, you betcha. 45 minutes. I mean, you think of how long it takes you and your family just to get ready to go to church. I mean, 45 minutes to try to get all of these people out and away from the river. I mean, that just shows how fast this water was moving. It picked up and it moved downstream and took things with it, unfortunately. So then we head into your 10 o'clock hour. River flood warning went out, Guadalupe River at Spring Branch, and they had a rise of the river there up to 34 feet. Then at 1:16 in the afternoon, they came out with another one of those situation reports. And I showed you an example earlier, but they said, okay, the flood watch has now been extended until 7 p.m. and flooding is ongoing and is only going to continue. So this is a look at what that situation report ended up saying, like, hey, this flood wave is continuing to move downstream, and unfortunately it's taken a lot with it just because of the sheer rise in water in such a short amount of time. So, you know, I just really wanted to go through this and clarify, because, you know, social media these days, you hear something that's posted on this site and that site, but the National Weather Service did a great job. I mean, we went through hour by hour, minute by minute on everything that they were saying. And, you know, going through, they had extra folks there. They were getting these warnings out. And I think it's just hard because we look at this storm, and it was the perfect storm in the sense of the timing. It was a holiday weekend. Think of all the people that have maybe never even been to Texas Hill Country, let alone know that the river could flood like that, that it was at night, that you couldn't see that it was coming. And, you know, if your phone is dead, you're not going to get alerts to it. So you need a NOAA radio. That's so important. You don't need GPS, and it's going to tell you the warning out loud in your ear, loud, wake you up from a deep sleep. And actually on social media, I went through and posted, you know, different terrain here in Southeast Texas, Houston area from Hill Country, obviously, but I did post an explainer on how you can get alerts here in Harris County of if there is a flood in your area, how you can get those notifications. So